He didn't roll up to his own wedding in a hired car wearing a rented suit. What pulled through the gates of a 500-acre Oxfordshire estate on the afternoon of Saturday the 5th of July, 2026, was a 250,000-pound orange McLaren supercar, with a 5-year-old in the passenger seat. That 5-year-old was Oscar, his son. 10 minutes before that entrance, Kaleb had been at a nearby pub with his ushers. And after the vows were done, and the photographs were taken, and the sun started dropping over the Cotswold hills, 2 full-size tractors raised their loader arms into the sky, arching them toward each other, until they formed a heart shape above the newlyweds. This is not someone who does anything at half measure. And this wedding was not the kind of thing that slipped past anyone unnoticed. Saturday, the 5th of July, 2026. Kaleb Cooper, 27 years old, farm contractor, best-selling author, Amazon Prime Video star, and the person who has spent 5 series patiently, and not always patiently, correcting Jeremy Clarkson's agricultural decisions in front of 8 million people, married Taya Wilkinson. The woman he met in a Chipping Norton shop a decade ago. Before the cameras existed, before the fame arrived, before any of it. Jeremy Clarkson was at the wedding. He brought the beer. Gerald came along with Susan. Hawkstone was flowing on tap, and by Sunday morning, Kaleb was back standing in a field. This is the full story of one of the most talked about men in British farming, and the day when, for once, none of it had anything to do with a tractor breaking down at the worst possible moment. They met when Kaleb was a customer at a shop where Taya worked, which is, quietly, one of the most straightforwardly unremarkable origin stories you could attach to anyone who has since been on the cover of magazines and toured theaters across the country. The year was 2016. Kaleb was 18 and had just registered Kaleb Cooper Contracting Limited, his agricultural services business, that same year. He was not on television yet. He hadn't written any books. He wasn't the person who would, within 6 years, be stood on a muddy field in Oxfordshire telling Jeremy Clarkson, in front of an audience of millions, that he'd drilled the wrong seed into the wrong ground at the wrong time of year. He was a teenager from Chipping Norton who'd been working in farming since he was 13, had just formalized his own contracting operation, and walked into a shop. Taya Wilkinson was working there. That was how it started. That was all of it. But to understand why that moment mattered, you have to understand what Kaleb had already built by the time he walked through that door at 18. Kaleb Wayne Cooper was born on the 2nd of July, 1998, in Chipping Norton. His parents were not farmers. His mother wasn't from an agricultural background, nor was his father. There is no farming dynasty behind him, no inherited acreage, no grandfather's land that eventually passed down the generations. What there was an obsession, a stubborn, early developed, entirely inconvenient obsession with the land and the machinery that works it. He started farming at 13. For his birthday that year, his mom didn't buy him a phone or a games console. She gave him 3 chickens and access to a small patch of land his father had. Within 2 months, Kaleb had turned those 3 birds into 450. He would walk around Chipping Norton with a basket full of eggs, knocking on doors, selling to teachers, selling to neighbors, selling to anyone who'd answer. He has described it in interviews as the thing that lit him up, not just the farming itself, but the business of it. The idea that you could start something from 3 chickens and, through sheer persistence, end up with a working enterprise before you were old enough to sit a GCS. He nearly didn't finish school because of it. The egg business had grown to a point where it was consuming every hour he had, and for a period, the academic side of his life was genuinely at risk of being abandoned altogether. He went back, finished his GCSEs, and eventually moved on to Morton Morell College, one of the country's more respected agricultural training institutions in Warwickshire, where he completed both Level 2 and Level 3 qualifications in agriculture. The formal education sat alongside the practical knowledge he'd been accumulating since he was barely a teenager. At 14, he expanded into sheep farming and started working shifts at a local dairy. At 15, he had saved enough to buy his first tractor. He was not old enough to drive it legally on a road. He bought it anyway. "I think I was put on this planet to farm," he said once. My mum's not a farmer, my dad's not a farmer, but I was set in my goal from a very young age. The tractor sat there as a kind of promise to himself about what was coming. By 16, he was working on Diddley Squat Farm in Chipping Norton, not for Jeremy Clarkson, who hadn't bought it yet in any active farming capacity, but for the previous farm manager, Howard Pauling, who was running the land at the time. Kaleb worked it. He knew every field. He knew what the soil did in different seasons and what machinery it asked for. He was a teenager, doing the work of someone twice his age and doing it seriously. In 2016, at exactly 18 years old, he launched Kaleb Cooper Contracting Limited. The decision came from a gap he'd identified in what local farmers were being offered. He wanted to build something more flexible, more client-focused, more responsive than what was available. Plowing, drilling, hedge cutting, crop management. He offered a professional contracting service across Oxfordshire and the surrounding areas. He was not yet famous. He was just very good at what he did. And Diddley Squat Farm was among his clients. That matters. Because when Jeremy Clarkson bought the 1,000-acre estate in 2008, and then, in 2019, decided to take over running it himself after his long-standing farm manager retired, there was already a young contractor from Chipping Norton who knew the land better than almost anyone. Clarkson kept him on. Kaleb, 20 years old and already running his own business, became the man tasked with keeping Clarkson's agricultural ambitions from collapsing entirely. He has been doing that, on camera, in front of a global audience, ever since. And then, that same year, Kaleb was 18, in his contracting business, walking into a shop. Taya Wilkinson was there. The rest of the decade followed from that. Taya and Kaleb were together for 6.5 years before a ring appeared. The proposal came on Christmas Day, 2022, which is exactly the kind of timing you would expect from someone who appears to structure his life around the agricultural calendar and his own internal logic, and treats everything else as secondary. He presumably went back to work on Boxing Day. By the time he got down on one knee, they already had 2 children. Oscar had been born in March 2021. Willa Grace arrived in June 2023, which was after the proposal, but before the wedding. Life, in the Cooper household, having apparently never agreed to operate at a convenient pace. The announcement went up on Instagram on Christmas Day, because that's when it happened. No carefully planned reveal, no coordinated magazine exclusive, no publicist involved. The caption was written the way someone writes something when they mean it and aren't thinking about the audience. She said yes. 2022 has been an amazing year. This definitely tops it off. I honestly can't wait for 2023 and all the following years after that. You're my best friend as well as the love of my life. Taya responded, I love you, can't wait to marry you. Simple, direct, nothing staged about it. The post landed with the weight of something that had been true for a long time before it was stated. It was also absorbed by a following that, in the 18 months since Clarkson's farm launched on Amazon Prime in June 2021, had grown from 0 to millions. By December 2022, Kaleb Cooper was a recognizable face on British television. He'd been on talk shows. His first book, The World According to Kaleb, published by Quercus in October 2022, had hit bestseller lists. He'd been nominated for a national television award. He was, by any measurable standard, famous. And the Instagram post was written exactly the same way it would have been written if none of that had happened, which is harder to pull off than it sounds. The years between the ring and the wedding, between December 2022 and July 2026, a considerable volume of life accumulated. Willa Grace arrived in June 2023. Season 3 of Clarkson's Farm was filmed. Season 4 was filmed. Season 5 was filmed. Kaleb published his second book, Britain According to Kaleb, in October 2023, followed by Life According to Kaleb in October 2024, and, for a younger audience, Kaleb's Farmyard Tales in September 2025, a children's series he described as an attempt to get the next generation interested in where food comes from and what real farm work looks like. He went on live tour. The World According to Kaleb sold out venues across the UK, theaters, not fields, though some audiences may have expected him to show up on a tractor. A recording of the final performance was released on Amazon Prime in November 2024 under the title The World According to Kaleb, On Tour. He took the show to Scotland in 2024, the furthest from home he'd ever performed. Then, in late 2025, he went considerably further, flying to Australia for his first solo Prime Video series, Kaleb, Down Under, a 4-part commission that saw him explore one of the world's largest agricultural markets. His statement upon booking the flights captured something essential. "I spend most of my time with the most traveled man in the world, so I got brave and booked my first ever flight to see what all the fuss was about." His companies continued to grow. Kaleb Cooper Productions Limited, his media company registered in Whitney, reported £960,000 in assets and a £666,000 profit for the year ending June 2024. Kaleb Cooper Contracting Limited, the business he'd started at 18 with the intention of bringing something more professional to Oxfordshire's farming services market, continued to operate alongside all of it. He crossed into millionaire territory, the corporate filings making it official, the McLaren making it visible. None of this relocated him from Chipping Norton. He still lived there. He still managed the same land. He still answered the same early mornings. And then in August 2025, their third child arrived. Ashton Cooper, born at Chipping Norton Maternity on the 14th of August, weighing 6 pounds 13 ounce, at 6:28 in the evening, in the same hospital that serves the same town where Kaleb grew up, built his first business, met Taya, and has continued to live, entirely deliberately and entirely without apparent interest in relocating to somewhere with a longer postcode and less mud. The birth made it into Season 5 of Clarkson's Farm, not because Kaleb arranged for cameras to be present, but because of what happened in the hours before it. Taya went into labor while he was working in the fields. He finished the harvest. He had a shower. Then he drove to the hospital. Jeremy Clarkson, in his Sun column, called it a farmerish response, and noted that he'd rung Kaleb during the labor and been told, essentially, to hold on. Viewers found this funny. Taya, holding the baby in the eventual photographs, appeared to have found a way to move on from it. Kaleb, for his part, posted a photo of himself eating a Chinese takeaway at the hospital bedside with the caption, "P.S. Don't worry, I bought the amazing midwives a Chinese as well." 3 children, a contracting business, a farm management role, a live tour, a solo Amazon series, 4 books, a children's imprint, and a combined company valuation approaching £1 million in equity. All of that while also, at some point in this period, planning a wedding that he had strong opinions about, specifically opinions involving tractors, and a future wife who had equally strong opinions in the opposite direction. The wedding was held at Court, a 500-acre wedding venue and working estate in Chipping Norton, Oxfordshire. Not a hotel in London, not a manor house in the Chilterns, not anywhere that required more than a few minutes in a car from Diddley Squat Farm, which sits roughly 5 miles away. Court is a genuine working estate. It has fields, outbuildings, and the kind of landscape that a man who has been operating machinery across Oxfordshire since he was 15 would look at and immediately feel at home in. The Cotswolds wedding industry is not short of options. Glossy venues, famous names, well-appointed spaces designed to accommodate people who want their wedding to photograph like a magazine editorial. Kaleb picked somewhere with 500 acres, a functioning agricultural backdrop, and proximity to where he grew up. The planning, by Kaleb's own account, was largely Taya's domain. He said before the wedding that she had handled the dress, the details, the overall vision, and that he thought that was exactly right. That everyone should have that in a day like this, and that if you're going to get married, it's a day for the whole family, and everyone involved should have a say in how it goes. He was largely in agreement with whatever she decided, with one exception: the tractors. He wanted tractors at the wedding. Taya had, by various accounts, reservations. Kaleb's position appears not to have shifted. The photographs from the end of the evening confirm the outcome of that negotiation. Wedding planning was handled professionally by Carrie Poulter Weddings and Events. The floral design, an aspect of the day that clearly mattered, given what made it into the photographs, was by Clementine Moon Floral Design. Catering came from Ross & Ross, a Cotswolds-based outfit with a reputation for exactly the kind of outdoor, estate-scale events that a Chipping Norton farm wedding demands. The cocktail provision was separate. All of this took place on 500 acres of working Oxfordshire countryside, 5 miles from Diddley Squat, in the general direction of everywhere Kaleb has ever been. Before the ceremony, he was photographed leaving a nearby pub with his ushers. Every outlet reported this as a charming pre-wedding tradition. It is also simply a man from Chipping Norton having a drink near where he grew up, surrounded by people he knows, before the biggest day of his life. Both of those readings are entirely accurate, and neither cancels the other out. Among those ushers, according to several reports, was Ben Francis MBE, the 25-year-old billionaire founder of Gymshark, which is an indication of how Kaleb's social world has expanded in the 5 years since a TV show about a farmer and a petrolhead became one of Amazon's most watched properties. He arrived at Mariscourt, as noted, in the orange McLaren. Oscar was in the passenger seat. The ushers arrived separately, though the reporting does not confirm the specific vehicles involved. The McLaren was worth £250,000. Oscar was 5 years old and appeared unbothered by either of these facts. Taya, the dress, the flowers, the photographs. Taya wore a flowing white gown from the bridal room, the dress featuring intricate floral detailing that ran through the fabric, a design that felt both formal and connected to the countryside setting around her. She wore a tiara, a long veil, and carried a bouquet of summer wildflowers in full color. Her shoes came from Fairfax and Favour, the Norfolk-based accessories brand that has built a following specifically among people who spend time outdoors and want to dress well while doing it. In every photograph that circulated online in the 24 hours following the ceremony, she looked like someone who had given the day serious thought and arrived at exactly the right answer for it. Kaleb wore a navy three-piece suit. On the lapel, a floral boutonniere. At his neck, a mustard yellow tie with a matching pocket square. His trademark wellies were, for the day, replaced by proper shoes. He looked like himself dressed up, which is different from looking like someone else dressed up, and the distinction matters. Jeremy Clarkson was already at the venue when things got going. Lisa Hogan was with him. This is the man who, in the Season 5 finale of Clarkson's Farm, had been filmed in a hospital bed saying, "If this is all successful, I'll see you for Series 6. The prostate cancer diagnosis had been one of the defining moments of that series, a show that began as a comedy about a man who didn't know how to farm and had, by Season 5, become something considerably more complicated and more human. In June 2026, Clarkson had confirmed to the Sunday Times that a PSA test had come back clear. He was in remission, and on the 5th of July, he was standing in a field in Oxfordshire watching the 27-year-old who has been managing his farm and correcting his decisions and keeping the whole operation from falling apart, get married to the woman he'd met as a teenager in a local shop. He brought the beer. Specifically, he supplied an unlimited quantity of Hawkstone, his own beer and cider brand, launched through Clarkson's Farm and brewed in partnership with a team that knew what they were doing in a way that Clarkson's approach to growing crops generally did not. The Sunday Times had listed Hawkstone among the fastest-growing beer brands in the United Kingdom. The business had reported a £21 million turnover in a recent financial year. The man who could not reliably harvest a field had, it turned out, a significant gift for making things that people wanted to drink. It was on tap at the reception, and Kaleb had announced this in advance with visible pleasure. Clarkson and Kaleb's relationship deserves more than a passing mention here, because it is genuinely not what it might look like from the outside. The format of the show places Kaleb in the role of the frustrated expert, trying to prevent his employer from making expensive agricultural mistakes, which is accurate. But off-camera, what exists between them is a proper friendship built over years of early mornings and shared problems. Clarkson has described Kaleb as the hardest working person I know, and said he doesn't have a day off, and does 18 hours a day, every day. Kaleb, for his part, has spoken about Clarkson as a mentor and a close friend, someone who had a direct hand in shaping the media career that now runs alongside the farming. When Clarkson's diagnosis was revealed in Season 5, Kaleb's response on camera was not performed. He told him, "Look after yourself. If you need anything, you just ring me." The fact that Clarkson then showed up at his wedding with a supply of unlimited Hawkstone is the sort of friendship that doesn't really require further explanation. Charlie Ireland was there too, the land agent who advises Clarkson on Diddley Squat Farm and has become one of the program's most popular figures on the strength of his dry composure and practical steadiness. Ireland did not restrict himself to standing at the edges looking professionally calm. A video that later circulated showed him on the dance floor with Kaleb, the pair of them performing to Saturday Night, with a level of commitment that suggested the Hawkstone supply had been doing its job. Eddie Hall was there. The former world's strongest man, the first person in recorded history to deadlift 500 kilograms, who has since turned his athletic profile into a media and fitness career. He is a man who communicates economically on social media, and his post from the wedding maintained that standard. Lovely day at the Kaleb Cooper wedding. He also filmed the first dance, the couple moving together on the floor as the evening went on, and shared it, which meant that 3 million people eventually got to see it. Ben Francis MBE was there. At 25, he founded Gymshark from his parents' garage in Birmingham and built it into a global fitness apparel brand valued at over £1 billion, making him one of the youngest billionaires in British business history. He attended as one of the ushers. The fact that Kaleb Cooper, a farm contractor from Chipping Norton who once earned 50 pence an hour and nearly didn't finish school because his egg business was taking over his life, now counts a billionaire among his closest friends and has him standing in his wedding party, is one of those details that television fame occasionally produces and that no one involved seems particularly interested in making a fuss about. And then there was Gerald Cooper. Gerald, who is no relation to Kaleb despite sharing the name, something the show has quietly acknowledged across 5 series. Gerald, who has spent those 5 series maintaining the dry stone walls that run across Diddley Squat Farm, 14 miles of them, which he has been repairing and tending for over 50 years. Gerald, who was diagnosed with prostate cancer during Season 4 and was declared cancer-free in 2024, who had, in Season 5, said something in a field that made everyone watching it feel something they couldn't easily name, who then put together a charity racing syndicate that raised £28,500 for Prostate Cancer UK. Gerald came to the wedding. He brought Susan. It was described as a rare public appearance for the pair of them. Of course he came. There was an ice cream van. There was a first dance, captured on film by Eddie Hall. There was an open bar of Hawkstone beer and cider, supplied without limit by the man who'd also turned up with the ring in spirit by showing up at all, given what the past year had held for him. There was a dance floor that, at some point in the evening, contained both the groom and a land agent performing to a Wigfield song from 1994. There was a field, because there is always a field. The couple posed for photographs beside a full-sized red tractor in the grounds, a deliberate callback to the agricultural world that forms the backbone of everything Kaleb is and does. They stood there in their wedding clothes, next to a machine he could probably drive in his sleep, grinning in the way that people grin when they're exactly where they're supposed to be. And then, as the celebrations wound down and the evening settled into the final stretch, 2 tractors rolled into position. Each raised its loader arms skyward. The arms curved toward each other and held there, angled together to form a heart shape above the newlyweds as the light went down over Oxfordshire. Whether this was the outcome of a sustained pre-wedding negotiation or a surprise Kaleb had been quietly arranging while Taya assumed the tractor question had been resolved, that is not on record. It happened. Both tractors, both arms, both raised. Taya is smiling in every photograph taken in that moment. That is what we have. It is worth noting that Kaleb had joked in the lead-up to the wedding about wanting a feral farm wedding, a phrase that suggested something considerably more chaotic than what eventually materialized. What actually happened was a professionally planned, beautifully catered, florally designed, luxury countryside event at a 500-acre estate with a billionaire usher and an ex-world's strongest man filming the first dance. The tractors at the end were his contribution to keeping the feral element alive. He held the line on that, at minimum. By Sunday morning, Kaleb had been up until the early hours watching England beat Mexico 3-2 in a World Cup match. He had spent the better part of the previous day at his own wedding reception, with Hawkstone on tap and 8 ushers and 3 million people who found out what had happened when he finally got his phone out. He had, by any sensible calculation, a perfectly legitimate set of reasons not to be operating agricultural equipment before most people had finished breakfast. He posted a video from a freshly mowed field. "Honeymoon," he captioned it, followed by a laughing emoji. He was joking, clearly, but also not entirely, because the field was real and the mowing was real, and the farm does not care what happened the day before. The machinery is where you left it. The work is what it is. In the conversations Kaleb gave before the wedding, one exchange stood out beyond the tractor debate. He talked about the planning, about how Taya had driven the vision for the day, the dress, the details, the feel of it, and said he thought that was right, that it was a special day for everyone involved, family included, and everyone should have a say in how they want it to go. He said it in the way someone says something when they mean it, rather than when they're being diplomatic. He held the line on one thing. He said Taya had expressed reservations about farm machinery at the wedding. He had expressed the opposite view. 2 tractors formed a heart above them at the end of the evening. That is the complete record of how that conversation resolved. There is a version of a story like Kaleb's that follows a familiar arc. A young person from somewhere ordinary gets famous, makes money, and slowly, almost imperceptibly, moves away from what they started as. The accent softens, the address changes, the priorities rearrange themselves around the new life rather than the old one. The tractors become a nostalgic reference rather than an actual presence. That version of the story is not what happened here. What makes Kaleb Cooper's story coherent, from the 13-year-old with 3 chickens and a 4-acre patch of land, to the 27-year-old who just got married in front of a tractor heart at a 500-acre estate 5 miles from where he was born, is that the fame arrived, and the money followed, and the McLaren is real, and the book sold, and the tour sold out, and the solo Amazon series happened, and none of it has moved him from the field. He still lives in Chipping Norton. He still manages the same farm. He is still the person his contracting clients call when they need work done properly. He still gets into the cab before dawn. He still finished the harvest before he drove to the maternity ward. He still went back to work the morning after his own wedding, because the field was there and the work was what it was. Taya knew all of this when she said yes on Christmas Day 2022. She knew it on the afternoon of the 5th of July, 2026, when he turned up at the venue in a 250,000-pound supercar with Oscar in the passenger seat, having been at the pub with his ushers 10 minutes earlier. She's known it since 2016, since a contractor from Chipping Norton walked into the shop where she worked, and their decade together started without either of them realizing it. Yesterday, it became official. Mr. and Mrs. Cooper, in a field in Oxfordshire. Hawkstone on tap, Clarkson with his beer, Gerald with Susan, Charlie Ireland on the dance floor, Eddie Hall with his phone out, Ben Francis in the wedding party, and 2 tractors making a heart in the sky as the sun went down. Kaleb posted the wedding photographs to his Instagram on Sunday morning. 3 million people saw them. The caption read, "Such an amazing day. He wasn't wrong. We'll see you for the next one."